Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Lawyers/cops of Reddit. What is the stupidest thing you've seen someone do to cover up a crime? Client was embezzling money from his engineering firm. Client actually had the money he had embezzled in his possession and could still return the money. He would have faced penal liability, but we could have pleaded him out to have served no more than a few months of probation. Under his circumstances, prison time was unlikely. Client does not believe our advance. Client believes he is going to prison. Client believes his best course of action is to return to his country of birth, Iran. The United States strictly prohibits transfer of technology which can be used for nuclear programs to Iran. I explain this all to client. Client tries to board a flight to Iran. In his luggage is a programmable logic controller his firm had been subcontracted with the federal government to develop. I don't know why he was taking this PLC with him, but it was there when he was pulled off the airplane in Stuttgart and taken into custody. Client is now facing up to 20 years in federal prison for espionage and unlawful transfer of classified military technology to a hostile power. People, listen to your effing lawyers. I knew a chick who robbed a house she was house-sitting for silverware and jewelry. She pawned it off at the closest pawn shop to the house, so she was caught right away. However, being the dope fiend she was, she poured bleach all over the house to get rid of her fingerprints. Instead of petty theft, she ruined the stairs and all the hardwood floors and paint on the walls and ended up with damages exceeding $10,000 if I remember correctly, which launched her well into new legal territories. Katrina destroyed my cousin's house, so we took her in at just 21 years old. My cousin was an alcoholic and addicted to cocaine. This only came to light because she'd been stealing bottles of wine from the local gas station across the street. We found out because the same family had run the gas station for 30 years and the grandpa character was very good friends with my father. He actually called him out of concern. Tracy has been stealing wine. A lot of wine. At first, I think she is a rebellious young girl. I did not call the police because I respect your family, but I worry for her and cannot afford for her to take any more for free. Not a criminal matter, but I worked on a child welfare case in which the parents were ordered to undergo hair follicle testing for drug use. So, the father, not my client thankfully, shaved off all the hair from his body, even his eyebrows. But he said it had nothing to do with the drug testing, it's just something he wanted to do. I think the kid ended up with relatives, in case you were wondering. There was a guy who went to his buddy's house after nearly beating his girlfriend to death. Police end up showing up to the house where the guy was. Friend answers, and buddy shows up behind the guy not wearing a shirt. This is important. Police say who they're looking for, and both men say they don't know who that person is. Here's the kicker. The guy that's shirtless, who beat his girlfriend, he has his first initial and last name in a big bold tattoo across his chest. This more of a failure to cover up, but I had a client who drove across the country to try to collect a drug debt. The police found the handwritten budget he had made for the trip. Items 1 and 2 were gun and bullets. Just happened last night. I work in a college town. Around 2:30, the bars close and the parade of drunk students commences. Kid had one traffic cone on each arm and one on his head, walking jauntily down the main drag. As soon as I pulled up next to him, he started doing the robotic drunk guy acting sober walk. Carefully put the cones down on the sidewalk and kept walking as though nothing had happened. Forgot about the one on his head though. I dealt with a guy once who had burned his parents' garage down. He had been drink driving, hit a cyclist, and hurt them. Driving ban, fine, maybe a suspended prison sentence given he had never been in trouble before. He was only 19 years old. But in his drunk mind, he decided that police couldn't prove he had been drink driving if there was no car. But he had parked the car back at home in the garage. So he effing well set the garage on fire with a can of petrol. Destroyed the garage, the car, the side of the house, the mobile home parked on the driveway, and a large proportion of his neighbor's garden. Still got charged with drink driving amongst other things. I wasn't a cop or a lawyer at the time, I was 8, but I think you guys will love this story. My mom worked at a school for teenage boys. One day, one of them decided he was going to buy a pound of plastic explosives from the internet, using the school computers. Then, for good measure, he fesses up to my mom when the rumors go around that there's some kind of bomb at school. Now, my mother knew that this boy was not malicious in any way, just an idiot with too much money on his hands. So she calls up the chemistry teacher, who was Polish and rotund and had already been in trouble several times for exploding things in his classroom. Dr. Exploja decides that the best course of action is to smuggle the explosives and the idiot student out of the school, take him to a field that the student's family owned, and perform a controlled detonation. He said I could come along too, since I was an 8-year-old that loved explosions and seeing people get in trouble. So, anyway, the stupidest thing I've seen someone do to cover up a crime is tell everybody in authority what they did and then explode the evidence with an 8-year-old as a witness. My sister is a Sergeant Leo that used to work in robbery. She shows up to court to be present for the case where a guy is on trial for robbing a bank. They have him on camera and he wants to represent himself, no lawyer. His opening line is, "Yes, Your Honor, I'd just like to point out that you can't tell that was me on camera because I was wearing a hat." Yeah, that was a fast trial. Not a cop or lawyer, but a few months ago, my friend called me asking for advice. She was with a friend of hers and they had weed on them and for an unrelated reason got into an altercation with local police. The cops were coming to her car, so she told her friend to hide the weed in her pants. The girl put the bag of weed in her underwear, I guess, and when the cops came, they could smell weed and were pretty much like, "Alright guys, give it up." But they were both vehemently denying they had anything on them, and one of the cops was all, "What's sticking out of your pants?" And the girl argues that she's on her period and it's her pad. She was wearing leggings and it was obvious. They clearly didn't buy it and could see something stuffed there, and after 20 minutes of arguing, they were pretty much like, "You either take it out now or we arrest you, go downtown, and strip search you." The girl got a weed ticket. I once defended a guy who was charged with harassing his ex-girlfriend, mostly through Facebook. As he waited for his trial date, this genius decided to set up a fake account in the name of his ex-girlfriend and privately message himself soppy love letters in an effort to prove this woman was actually still into him and he hadn't been harassing her. I guess he forgot that the messages he had been sending to his actual ex were things like, "F you, you effing B, I'm going to rip your effing C out," etc. I tried explaining that no amount of sappy feel-good exchanges were going to explain that SOA, even if the court believed his ridiculous story. But this guy kept insisting that the fake account was real and, I had no proof it wasn't, and junior lawyer me lacked the experience to tell this guy to go fly a kite. So, on the trial date, he shows up and he has all of these printouts of messages between him and his ex's new account, but he's totally gone off the deep end. He started fighting with himself through his pretend messages, rehashing old arguments he used to have with his ex. It was the saddest, stupidest echo chamber of idiocy I've ever had to shout through to get a client to pay attention. He couldn't even keep on good terms with his pretend ex that he had total control of. The messages had spiraled into much the same abuse. We went for a peace bond as a last-minute plea bargain, and I never heard from him again. Small town in Arkansas, the pharmacy is in a rock building with a tin roof. Some guys who steal S figure out with a crowbar they'd get right in. And they were right! So they threw the drugs into the back seat instead of the trunk. They stopped to get gas and are just about to be on their way. A state trooper is headed to the same station to take a leak and get coffee. The guys play it cool. They start the car and floor it. Burned rubber nearly crashed getting on the highway. Being an experienced trooper, this sparked his curiosity, so he hits the lights and begins pursuit. Finally gets them stopped, and once he sees the pile of pill bottles, he has some idea about what may be going on. Hauls them to the county jail and is inventorying everything when the sheriff says the local pharmacist is on the phone, so he may as well talk to him. Pharmacist wants to report a burglary. Trooper asks, did they take, and begins reading the inventory. Pharmacist says, that sounds about right. Trooper says, well, I think I solved it. Client was accused of embezzling millions from a company. This was simply false. The company owner had been hiding it from his spouse. The owner's lawyer called me up to extort my client and told me that if our client testified as to facts XYZ in support of his defense in the divorce, that they would appreciate it. If my client would not perjure herself, they would have her prosecuted. I recorded the attorney and filed a transcript along with a motion with the court. The judge brought down the hammer, and he was professionally disciplined by our state licensing authority for attorneys. This is a true story. When I was in ADA, a colleague of mine had a case where a couple of guys robbed a jewelry store. The police showed up, and there was a chase. They all split up, and all got caught, but one of them had a bit of head start. Apparently, he ran into a beauty salon and started yelling that he needed to dye his hair immediately. And then police ran in after him. Oh, and there was also the guy who stole jewelry out of someone's house and shoved it up his A when he got caught. They found it during the strip search because some of it was still hanging out. Finally, there was a guy wanted for murder. He had a long ponytail, and a few days after the murder, he cut it off and got his head shaved. When he was arrested, he still had the ponytail in his pocket. A guy I worked with was being charged with dangerous driving following a pursuit involving a police helicopter. He would have faced a fine and 1-year driving ban. His lawyer told him to plead guilty. He ignored this advice and insisted on going to trial, and his sole defense was that the police didn't have any kind of video recording of his crime, as though this was some kind of technicality that would get him off. In questioning, he even admitted to what he did, but still tried to convince the court that he was not guilty because there's no video recording. The court threw everything at him, everything but a prison sentence, got a suspended one instead. The arresting police officer even told him he would just got a telling off had he stopped, but his insistence on trying to play the system ended up majorly screwing him over. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.